Thank you guys for coming tonight. This is my cousin, Nick Thomas. Nick ran this past year in 2018 for in Colorado Second District, for the U.S. House of Representatives as a centrist candidate, trying to sort of bridge the partisan gap that is, as we all talk about in our class and everything, sort of growing all the time. And so he's going to share a few words with us, and then just sort of open up into more of a discussion format. So yeah, thank you all for coming, and have a nice day.
So thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it, and I'm particularly thankful to the cousin here for inviting me out. I think I've been to this campus once, as I remember the Oval. I'd love to spend more time on it, but you really have, for America, a historic location. We're talking about Europe. It's something else entirely. What a beautiful building this school is. I'll let you know that for starters, I actually did a master's in international studies and foreign policy, which I then rebranded as a master's in diplomacy and got them to sign off because I love the idea of somewhere in Denver, Colorado, being about diplomacy. And our school was named after Joseph Corbell, Madeleine Albright's father, and his star student was Condi Rice. So it was a great foreign policy school as long as you didn't want to work in DC. It was great for the international connections and international work. So thank you for letting me be here. I'll touch on basically why I did what I did and try to keep it brief, and then more of a Q&A since this is what I used to do, and I think it's better to be interactive with a group of students. So Nick Thomas, I ran as an independent in Colorado's 2nd Congressional District in this past election, November 6th. There was a period pre-Kavanaugh that we were polling near 30% in a three-way race. There has not been an independent in the U.S. House in 2 decades. We had one of the best chances nationwide, and then Kavanaugh came along, and red went redder, blue went bluer, and we took 16,500 votes, which was the best in Colorado state history for a third-party candidate in a midterm, but comparatively it was nothing. So it was a little upsetting and embarrassing initially, and then as we started going through the numbers and the aftermath and what had happened nationwide, it was a good run. You just don't run and put that time and effort and 15 months into not doing as well as I would have liked. So the reason I launched has to do with basically what you touched on. The incredible partisanship and deep divide in America right now. It is horrific. I've been working for years with both sides in the state of Colorado, good people and good ideas, rather than a red party or a blue party. And happened to be out here, actually, nearby in DC, 3 years ago now, 2 years ago now, when the shooting at the baseball game took place. You guys remember this? So I was with one of the Democrats, actually, from Colorado. I was in his office talking to him about helping on another campaign. And he actually plays on that team. And so I left his office, got ready to go a completely different direction. The shooting took place, and something flipped at me. And I actually called up John Lewis, who's been a long friend and mentor, and went with him to the baseball game. We sat in the stands and talked about where we were as a society. And if you tuned into that ball game, you saw the blue and the red team line up together and pray together and play together and do whatever else they did together. This incredible moment of unity in an otherwise completely polarized city by that time. Now I would say it's worse today. It seems to get worse by the week. But I came back, talked to a lot of friends and mentors, and somebody who was not interested in running, 35 years old, paying off my MBA and my MA in diplomacy. There was no way I was going to run until this happened. And I realized, my God, somebody's got to do it. And it needs to be somebody who's tied in enough to be a serious, credible candidate, but at the same time crazy enough to leave the party the system where the money is, where the power is, where people laugh at you or attack you from both sides. And I happen to be okay with both of those things, so we launched the campaign. Ambassador Andrew Young was my first endorser on the left, and I always wanted to keep it equal. So at the same time, we also had Bud McFarland, who was Ronald Reagan's national security advisor. He flew out to Colorado and did an event for me on Veterans Day. Basically, both of them saying the same thing. We have to have somebody in the middle. There can't simply be a red party or a blue party, or we will continue going down the path we're going down. And I should jump back. Does everybody know about the baseball game? Okay. Somebody walking up and saying, are you Democrats or are you Republicans, and opening fire. So, fast forward greatly. We had a powerful campaign in Colorado. We brought an amazing amount of legislators together. We kept the conversations positive as you can imagine. The Democrat had been a friend of mine for 10 years. I sat down with every single person as they jumped into the campaign. We had a couple different libertarians at different times. We had a number of Democrats. But we kept it incredibly positive. And I like to think one of the reasons for that was having somebody that wasn't just the lesser of two evils. Having somebody you could vote for and feel it was okay to vote for. We also, when we ended, had the second highest percentage of votes in the country as a district. So between the Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, and myself, we had a higher voter turnout than anywhere else in the country except for a place in either Maine or Vermont, but we were number 2 out of the 435. And then the other beauty that kind of came from it was we figured out a way to be involved in nearly every debate and have heavy media coverage throughout, both of which are normally totally discounted by media and by the two parties. They're usually able to maintain control and keep any third-party voice out. And so this was the third big win for us, if you will. And it led to, I got endorsed by a couple of the papers in our district, which meant it was the first time a third-party candidate had ever been endorsed. Now, where do we go from here? I'm trying to rush this through so we can just go with the Q&A. I cannot imagine running again, one, because that wasn't the intent in the first place, and two, because how it ended, and we had an open seat. So now there's somebody who's actually going to be an incumbent. And what that basically means is if I ran again, and the Republican Party, again, this is safe to see, the Republican Party put up a candidate again, they would have no chance, and I would have no chance. Because now the stage has sort of been set until you have dramatic change in our legislative system. And what I mean by that is, do you all know that in Maine, they passed ranked choice voting? And then the legislature tried to take it away, and the citizens came around again, and it passed, and then one of the sides won because of it, and it went to court, and then it backed off. So it's officially, in one of the 50 states in the United States, we have ranked choice voting. And that means we've thrown the first stone. We're breaking the ice. Colorado, it's legal. We have 6 small towns that are doing it already, but implementing it in a small town is also ignored by the general public and the media. However, because of what happened in Maine, and because of what I think a number of individuals were able to do across the state this year, we are actually seeing a massive groundswell to push forward ranked choice voting in Colorado over the next 2 years. In a number of communities, Denver, Aurora, Boulder, Fort Collins, and then as a statewide ballot initiative. We have, I probably shouldn't say the company, but there's a guy who's the CEO of a company who's got a lot of money, and he backed a ballot initiative 2 cycles ago for having open primaries. And that was the first step, I think, in our democratic process. It didn't necessarily impact or help an independent, because what you guys do as voters is get to see a Democrat and a Republican on the primary ballot, but no independent. So you get one more look, and boy, name recognition is a big thing. But you don't get to see the final outcome of the full list. However, that was a first step. Our second step, which happened this year, was we brought out Schwarzenegger with this guy as our face of these things, because you do need either money behind something or a figurehead or both. And we were able to get, I guess, the second step toward truer democracy. And then the third step would be pushing for ranked choice voting. We're hoping this gentleman and a few other people who helped those first two actually gets on board with this one too, and we think he will. So that's the boring side out of the way. So, before I go on to anything long, why don't we start with just a back and forth. Is there anything that brought you here tonight that you'd particularly like to know, whether running as a candidate, particularly at 35 years old, whether the stuff we faced in DC or Colorado, or just generally who, what, where, when, why, and I won't be offended by anything. We've had it all.
Question. So I think a lot of times when we discuss political parties looking a little different with our generation, I think a lot of people in our program often say, like, I'm very fiscally conservative or socially liberal, and so they kind of go back and forth where they probably would fall in an independent party. Like, do you foresee in the future, specifically of like the millennials and Generation Z, like the Republican Democrat parties looking different, or an independent party being present and more prominent? Just on your take, what do you think?
And what was your name?
Natalie.
I planted Natalie with that question. Thank you, Natalie. So the boring stuff's out of the way. Now I'm going to give you more opinion-based feeling. This country badly needs change. The Democrats aren't working for us. The Republicans aren't working for us. We've reached a precipice. And I think we're headed toward another version of a civil war, if you will. We are in a dangerous, dangerous place. And just look at what's been going on for the last 33 days in DC, you'll realize why. So, yes, clearly, most people are not part of the fundamental ideology of the two parties. But the problem is, during the primary system, as you all know, given the classes you're taking, if you want to run for the Democratic Party, if you want to run for the Republican Party, you usually, in general, Trump was a little different, and others, Bernie was a little different. We saw the populist uprising, but we also saw it because people were so sick of the system. And I'll say, in my opinion, Trump won because the Republican Party was weaker than the Democratic Party during that election. The Democrats were able to hold on to control enough to suppress the populist vote and hand it to Clinton. And we saw it through Donna Brazier's book, and other things of what happened behind the scenes. They held on to it, they gave it to Clinton, and we were looking for a populist because we were so sick of what was happening. The Republicans had 9. We tried for Jeb, we tried for Ted, we tried for Marco. They kept falling, and suddenly we got Trump, but he was the populist, and he took it. And yet, he hasn't done any of the things that people were waiting for, that people were looking for. The idea of crossing the aisle, the idea of bringing the common person's views to the table, or draining the swamp, if you want to call it something different. Bill Clinton, so I used to work a little with CGI, and Bill Clinton used to go around and give one quote. Depending on the audience, it was always something different. But there was always one quote that I enjoyed hearing him say again and again, and it was this: when I was president, I spent $115 million or so of your taxpayer dollars on decoding the human genome. And what we found out is we were 99.8% the same. So we are all fighting over 0.2%. Wars are declared on 0.2%. And right now, even since the Clinton years, it's even worse with, I was speaking at the King Center 2 nights ago on what social media has done to this. And it's killing us. I mean, it is killing us. We are putting ourselves in a cycle of self-fulfilling knowledge, or you have mainly people on your social media feed who agree with you. And then you become more and more excited and stuck in your beliefs. Most people are not like this. I used to say, and I think this still rings true a little bit, and this is grand, broad strokes, but if you're in law or banking or, what else? A number of certain industries, you might put your fiscal policies first. And so you might automatically say, oh, I guess I'm a Republican. And the moment you label yourself, you have to follow all the other things. And if you're oftentimes in education or government or nonprofits and others, you're more concerned with your social aspects. So you might label yourself a Democrat, and all of a sudden you have to fall into all those other categories. And we've seen psychology studies that say once you label yourself, and you hear other people say, well, a Democrat believes in this, now you have to believe in that. And we've brainwashed ourselves. And you're right, the heavy majority of Americans, no matter where you are in this country, yes, there's massively different landscapes throughout. Kansas, Denver is not the same as Texas or San Francisco, and yet we are majority fiscally conservative, socially responsible. But by labeling ourselves, we're getting away from that. Now, the other part of your question, we are in that breaking point, going to have a change. And hopefully it's in a positive way, but we are going to have a change. You're going to see, and this is going to upset a lot of Dems, and it might upset some Republicans, but I'm absolutely sure you're going to see some form of an independent run for president. And the big issue here is that there's two ways of thinking about voting when you have a third party involved. One is the honesty of the vote, and the other is the poison of the vote. If you're in a lot of different tight elections, we think of the, what do we call it, Ross Perot, Al Gore, this sort of thing. What is it? Anyway, it's a poisoning of the vote. It's this idea that you have, by voting for Jill Stein in this last election, you may have cost Hillary the election. By voting for Perot, you probably cost HW his second round. By voting for Nader, you cost Al Gore. So that's the negative side. The positive is, in my opinion, that shouldn't even be an issue. In reality, if you have a problem with the way somebody voted, you voted for Jill Stein. I should actually be voting. I should actually be voting focused on the person who didn't vote at all. 40% of Americans who didn't vote at all, rather than taking it out on the 2 to 7% of Americans who voted for a third party. But what? But that's a personal view, and the problem is, in my election, this idea sullied my vote. The amount of people who wrote me and said, particularly in the last 2 weeks, which was a little bit obnoxious, but I want you to know I supported you, but I held my nose. This was direct quotes. I held my nose and I voted for so-and-so because I didn't want, I held my nose and I voted for so-and-so because I was afraid of, usually it was the Republican winning. And I kept saying to people again and again, do not get confused between a tight election, something that's actually viable, and the majority of elections around the country. 80% of House seats we know are going to go to blue or red. We know that. And I kept telling people, mark my words, this post-Kavanaugh, we knew we would win. Mark my words, we won't win, but the Democrat will double the Republican vote. And so even if you had 2 Democrats in my seat run, they would still both beat the Republican. And sure enough, it was about 61-30 and our 6 or whatever it was. I mean, the problem there is any of those Democrats can vote for us without fear of splitting the vote. And any Republican could vote for us because they're not going to have a guy in the race anyway. And yet they were so sure, because of what culture has taught us that they had to double down, that they voted for their red or blue. That's going to change. because we're finally starting to have some interesting organizations pop up that are actually teaching people, finally, skills and politics and understanding the vote and understanding the district and understanding the system, little by little. So.
I'm just curious if you started out, if you grew up liking one party or the other, or leaning towards liberal or conservative, or if that changed as you were in high school and through college and grad school. How did you eventually land on being independent?
My parents are Quakers. You guys have Quakers out here. Not a lot of people in Colorado fully understand what a Quaker is. Are you a Quaker? Sorry. I don't mean to call you out. My family is about as liberal as you can possibly come. My extended family in Colorado, actually, in Aurora, my uncle's a Mormon bishop. So they're about as conservative on the political spectrum as somebody can possibly come. And our families were very close growing up. And so our Thanksgiving conversations, our dinner conversations, are what all conversations should still be. We've lost the ability to communicate with each other, and I think this is the biggest problem. I don't think there's anything wrong with you and I having a full-blown argument about something, as long as we respect each other and focus on the idea itself, rather than personal attacks, and that's what we've got. So growing up, I had this beautiful conversation that was constantly going on in front of me of people from very, very polar sides feeling one way or the other. My parents don't believe guns should exist. My uncle held NRA meetings in his basement, the basement of his CPA firm. And I learned to hunt with him, and I learned to respect certain things with my parents. So I always felt that I was an independent. I never felt that I was with one side or the other. In the early days, I worked as an aide down at the state capitol to a libertarian Democrat, which is kind of funny. And he was also very supportive of having conversations. I would heavily disagree with him on certain things. He was one of the advocates against passing a required seatbelt law. And I was more into the nanny state on that thing. I said, people should buckle up, you know. And so we'd go back and forth. He was also very pro payday lending. I was not. But he allowed me to battle back and forth with him and then do my job, do the research, and help him pass his bill, because he was the senator. So I never really changed out of that. I was always open-minded, and I've changed certain things on policy, even during the campaign, and got attacked on one or two things. And I always thought that was interesting, too, because we've seen during presidential campaigns, W got it a couple times, Kerry got it. If you change a view, Tulsi's got it right now. Tulsi was just attacked for what she said about LGBT people 12 years ago. And, you know, that anybody who's a Tulsi fan is putting up this stuff, well, Hillary took longer to come around, but you all loved Hillary, so it's okay. We have a high ability to ignore the fallacies of the person we like, and a very low threshold for being offended by the policies of a person we don't like. I think I've always just kind of stayed somewhere in the middle, open-minded, and allowed myself to appreciate certain things. I certainly lean very left on a lot of social issues, and I got the MBA. I'm more conservative on fiscal issues, but that doesn't mean I'm against social programs. So it's the assumptions that also had to be explained in our campaign, and I also learned in the campaign, which I'd always known, but I thought, I can be different. I can say things with more depth rather than sound bites. So I got up at a gun debate, and I said, both sides are wrong, and it's okay to do this, that, and the other. And I got just viciously attacked on both sides for not being completely anti the red flag bill we had going on, or not being completely for the red flag bill going on. Sound bites kill us too, so. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Thanks. Somebody over here? Covered it? Oh.
Sure. Yeah, my name is Zach. So there's a big movement now, actually, for candidates in office, also on campaign to not accept corporate PAC money. So I'm just wondering where you stood on that as an
So I was totally against money in politics. There's always going to be some form of money in politics, but I was totally against corporate PAC money. You're right. There's no way of getting around that. We had one PAC that supported us. One PAC that I took money from. Do you guys know? What's his stage name? Alex Ebert. It's my brother's. It's one of his favorite bands. Edward Sharp and the Magnetic Zeros. Okay, so Edward Sharp and the Magnetic Zeros. That Edward Sharp is not a real person. It turns out it's a guy named Alex Ebert. I didn't know this, but my twin, following him online, turns out he got into politics because he was also sick of the system. And he invited him out to Colorado to meet with me, and we completely hit it off. And he created a PAC that we took money from. We actually took a lot of his support. He came out and did a concert for me. He's a total Bernie guy, as far left as could be, and at the same time was okay talking about all the problems that Bernie had, talking about all the problems that his supporters had, talking about all the problems that the system had. Very open-minded and believed, hey, we should go issue by issue. And so we joined him, or he joined us, but I was very open about that. So open, in fact, I think my Democrat got upset with me. When we called him out for taking oil and gas money, and he got upset with me for taking money from the musician. And I thought, I'll take that trade. The other big things that I was able to run on by not running in the party, and here's the other thing. Sorry, so I should color this up a little bit. When you run as an independent, you're allowed to speak your mind. This is one of the reasons that even now I don't mind, except for specific people, not biting my tongue, being honest about these things. I think I was quoted in a paper, and I actually regret this because I don't think you should be disparaging about the people you're going to have to work for or with, but I was quoted in one of the papers during a debate when I answered a Trump question, so I thought he was a sociopathic narcissist. And I shouldn't have said that, because if you go into Congress, you're going to have to work with him to some degree. You can't just, before even election day happens, cut your ties and make political points. It shouldn't be the case. I may feel that, I may believe that, but as long as he's the current sitting president until he's either thrown out or loses or 6 years from now hangs on, who knows, one of those three options. You have to work for the person, with the person in power to try to move things along. And here's an example of that. We can always, there's always a way to offend everybody in the room. So here's one. The government's shut down right now. It is the fault of everyone. It is not just in Trump's hands. It is not just in the Democrats' hands. And when I put something like this up, my twin, who is as liberal as my parents, ripped into how, no, this is Trump's fault. He owns this. And then one of my more conservative Colorado people ripped into him, no, this is purely Pelosi's fault. I was driving down here today and listened to the radio and heard Pelosi get up and do her thing and heard Steve Scalise get up and do his thing, and both of them talked about how the other side is playing politics. In my opinion, open the government without any other thing in the bill. It is absolutely insane that we play politics with 800,000 people's jobs. And then also make a promise, Democrats, that you will provide some funding for the wall. My personal feeling on the wall, I think it's stupid. It's a waste of money. Between wildlife animal crossings, between if you're actually dealing with immigration issues, with everything else, spending a single penny right now on the parts of the wall that he's talking about is pointless. It doesn't do anything particularly for the intent. However, we currently have a president who won, maybe not a popular vote, but he won in the election we set up as a country. And one of the things he ran on was building a wall. And if you can't give, it's not going to be $5 billion, but if you can't give $2 or $3 billion to somebody like that in order to move the conversation forward, then you are being as childish as the other side. Do you understand what I'm saying? Democrats have complained in the past, like myself. One of the things I ran on is taking money out of the Department of Defense in our 11 armed conflicts. I don't think we should have so much money in wars, and I don't think we should be in some wars. I have a real problem with some of my tax dollars going to all these different armed conflicts that are only making us worse off. I focused on the Middle East, and you realize the situation the West has put itself in, and we're greatly responsible for the way things are right now. So I have a problem with my tax dollars going to some of these things. I have Republican family, particularly the Mormons, who have a lot of problem with their dollars, their tax dollars, going to certain social programs, and particularly their big thing is Planned Parenthood. But you've seen the debates with NPR, you've seen Planned Parenthood, you've seen all these things. There's people on the left who can't stand their tax dollars go to this. There's people on the right who can't stand that their tax dollars go to this. And what everybody seems to forget, and nobody on the media is talking about, is that when you live in this country, you participate in elections, you pay taxes. It goes into a general fund, and those who you elect get to decide where that goes. If you don't like it, you vote them out. There's nothing wrong with going into the street, particularly if you voted. Don't go into the street if you haven't. But there's nothing wrong with going to the street and stating your opinion. But in the end of the day, somebody is going to have what they want a little bit, somebody's going to have what they want a little bit. They're both going to be a little upset with the other places that goes, but you need to find common ground. And neither party seems to have the ability to do that today. 33 days, or 34 days, and yet we're still in this complete government meltdown. And so we're going to see a third-party candidate get into the presidential race, and a number of other races. You're going to see a big uptake in this, and I hope it goes the right way.
So, you mentioned racial study being your third, whatever the group of things, whatever you would term the group of things that you mentioned. How does ranked choice voting play into your experience as a third-party candidate, and does it like either confirm your beliefs, or here's the question. So, what is ranked choice voting, and how does your experience inform your belief about it? Either way that we should go.
So currently the kind of voting style is whoever has the most. It's not necessarily even a first past the post, it's whoever has the majority. Which means that we are manipulated into thinking you have to vote for somebody who you think might win. But media has told you, friends have told you, etc., etc. So we basically pare down as a society, no matter where you are in the 535 elections that could be taking place, you pare down to two. That will always be the case in any system that says there's a winner and everybody else is a loser. There will always be two major parties. In something like ranked choice voting, and for those who don't understand, say we have 4 people running, and they get, it doesn't matter the votes, but first, second, third, fourth place, and nobody has 51%. Anybody, the fourth place gets knocked out. Oh, and I should say, I'm sorry. Let me just try to be as clear as possible. It's a lot easier to write it. But you each have 1 vote, but you go first, second, third, fourth. You don't have to vote through it, but you can say, I want you as my first choice, my second choice, my third choice, my fourth choice. And then when it's all tallied up with the first choices for everyone, whoever's in fourth place drops. And now you see, and whoever voted for them, their second choices go to the other 3. And then you see again, do we have somebody who's over 51%? If not, third place gets dropped, and whoever was their second choice goes to the first 2. And then you again will have somebody at that point who's over 51%. The beauty there is all of a sudden, this fallacy that I face, that other third-party candidates have faced in the past, of you're splitting the vote, or it's a wasted vote, or whatever else, is no longer the case. Democrats could have voted for me first, and they're Democrats second. Republicans could have voted for me first, and they're Republicans second. Libertarians might have voted for the Libertarian, and then second me, and then third the Republican, most likely. And all of a sudden, there's no fear that you are costing somebody something. And the beauty of systems that have implemented things like this is the 2 main party candidates often become less extreme during the process. They suddenly realize that not just you guys who are always going to vote Democrat matter, but also you guys who are independents, which is the majority in our country. 42% of Americans call themselves an independent before a Democrat or Republican. You guys also matter, because you may vote for the independent first, but I want your second vote. In my district, and this is why we had a lot of media, this is why we had a heck of a chance for a while. In my district, I'm going to get these numbers wrong, but the rough idea, there were 144,000 Democrats when I launched. That dropped to 132,000 by the time 15 months later. There were, nope, that's the Republicans, sorry, 144 down to 132. Republicans, there were 190 when I started, and there were 179 or something when I ended. And the independents, there were 160, and it went up to 190 or some crazy thing. The independents grew tremendously. It was partly because of the other stuff that had passed in 2016, the open primaries, but it was also this trend. The majority of young people sign up as independents. The majority of people breaking off from the system don't switch from a Democrat to a Republican or Republican into a Democrat like they used to. They're so sick of the system, they just unaffiliate. We were actually the majority in my district, heavily, one of the highest concentrations of independents in the country. But whether I didn't have good enough policies for them or greatly to do with, we didn't have enough media to get a lot of that out, and because a lot of people were so afraid of splitting the vote, we didn't have the amount we could have had. If you have ranked choice voting, it just completely changes the game.
I want to take ranked choice voting again myself.
Good.
But just talking about like strategy, how do you think the best way to go about implementing ranked choice voting across the country is? Like ballot initiatives, starting small local governments, or big money out? What's your thoughts?
So the second step that I didn't specifically get into earlier, I'm trying to keep it light, but so we had open voting, open primaries. The second step that was funded by this guy was anti-gerrymandering initiative. We called it Y and Z. There were 2 ballot initiatives, but they became so important. When I endorsed Y and Z, I was one of 8 people in the state who endorsed it. And we got crucified for it, but I believed in it. By the end of it, it was amazing. Because by the end of the election, when people went to vote, it was so loved by everybody involved that it passed by 80–90%. But it's because we got the Democrats and Republicans to log on. We got the League of Women Voters, and we got the head of the Republican Party to both endorse the initiative. When I endorsed, it was me and the old governor and one of my professors, actually, from undergrad. And people hated it until Democrats and Republicans realized that this anti-gerrymandering initiative meant the other side couldn't rig the system. And again, if you want to work in politics, understand people's religion, because they go hand in hand as much as we pretend it doesn't, and understand people's psychology. And humans are more afraid of what they can lose rather than what they can gain. We are more afraid of loss by a long shot. And so if you go to the Democrats and Republicans and you say, by the time that we have this census coming up, we have no idea if the Democrats or Republicans will control the House. So they'll be the ones who get to gerrymander it. What if? The moment you put this what if in front of them, they go, oh my God, I don't want them to do it. In reality, probably the Democrats in Colorado will control the House. We're pushing blue. We were famous for being a purple state. We're pushing blue. We just had our bluest sweep in 80 years. It hurt me. But because it wasn't a guarantee, even the Democrats signed on, because they were so afraid that it would be gerrymandered back the other way. So the third step, of course, being ranked choice voting, I think we used this same kind of idea. Because in general, I guess Schwarzenegger told me this really, I think he was off record, but I don't think it matters. He was in his office one day with the head of the Democrats and the head of the Republicans, fighting it out. And he said they were yelling, they were vicious, this and that was going on. And he had to leave for another meeting, and so he left, meeting's over. I don't even know what the subject issue was about. And then he said about 30 minutes later, his assistant gets a phone call. And she said, hey, it's the head of the Dems and the head of the Republicans. I don't know if it was the speaker or whatever else, but the top of the party. They're both on the phone wanting to talk to you. He goes, what? 30 minutes ago, they were at each other's throats. What the hell's going on? So he gets on the phone, this is our, you know? And one of the guys goes, hey, we heard you're supporting this anti-gerrymandered initiative. And we want you to know that it's a terrible idea. And I don't just think that way, so does, Tony. Tell him, Tony, the other guy, oh yeah, this is a terrible idea, don't do it, don't support it, don't sign off on it. It was a citizen ballot initiative. So he gets off the phone, bewildered. And he turns to Seth and he goes, what just happened? I've never heard them so agreeable. And he came to the realization that if the head of the Dems and the head of the Republicans are on board with something, it's clearly against the American people. And so he immediately put his entire team behind it, rolled it forward, and that's why California now has the top 2 system, which is a different form, but another step forward. We need a change no matter what it is, whether it's proportional representation, ranked choice voting, their top 2 tier, we need to have something different. In Colorado, we can do the same thing. And, well, we're headed in the right direction. So is Michigan, and so is Oregon, and Washington, actually. But in a state like Virginia, I actually don't know what your system is, but the way you get people there, scare them on the other side. And if you can't do that, you go through the Citizens Initiative. It's expensive. But the moment people understand something like ranked choice voting, statistics show they support it. The moment you roll out your couple $1 million educational campaign and they know what it is and what it means, they support it. It doesn't matter where they're coming from. It's their legislators who are trying to hold it down because you lose power by allowing for more voices in the room. Cool? Any other quick thoughts?
I just one thought, when you stand in the middle, you say, I agree with this issue on the left and this issue on the right, and, sort of go issue by issue, you're sort of all over the place. You're basically guaranteeing that for any given voter, they're going to disagree with a significant portion of your views. How do you address sort of each individual voter who comes up and says, hey, I agree on a bunch of stuff, but I also really disagree with a bunch of stuff, and maybe one party or the other, agree with a little bit more. Is it sort of your experience that most of the voters you talk to, actually you agree with on more issues than they would in either party? Or do you feel like you're having to sort of convince them, hey, even though I disagree with you on a bunch of issues, this is the right thing to do for the sake of bipartisanship, civility, actual pragmatism?
So I remember in business school, one of the first things that I learned that was like a shock, and at the same time you look back on it and you go, this is common sense, is most negotiations, you'll learn this in your negotiation class, you probably already know it, but most negotiations are not a zero-sum game. Most things you do, both sides can benefit. And I think most policies, kind of like what I went back to in the first place, where most of us lean more to the left socially, more to the right fiscally, if you will. If you're playing with both of those sides, then more often than not, you're actually going to have people agree with you on 70-30. So the problem isn't that they disagree with you more than they agree with you, where it's 50-50. It almost never is. Most people, whatever side they're on, I'm in more agreement than I'm in disagreement. The problem is when the disagreement is a sticking point, as we've made a lot of issues. So, do you guys know what 2 of the biggest issues that people just cannot come across on are? Guns and abortion. That's exactly right. Both of those should be purple issues, we call them. Both of those should be complex, not yes or no. For instance, most people who are pro-choice don't agree that a third-term abortion should just be as easy as can be. And most people who are, pro-life, I hate both of those labels by the way, but most people who are pro-life don't actually disagree with the idea that a woman is able to have an abortion if she's raped. These are two of the extremes, but most of us fall closer in. It's not a yes or no, it should either be legal or illegal. Guns is another one, so I got up at this gun debate, I basically said, all the Republicans want to do as a response to any issue, shooting, whatever else, is thoughts and prayers. That is their response. But all the Democrats want to do is say, ban assault rifles, which is a term that the Democrats came up with, and that will do it. The gun debate that we had happened the day after a shooting took place in Colorado, and we've had far too many since Columbine, that included no assault rifle style things. It included a pistol with a high capacity magazine and a sawed-off shotgun, and yet they were able to kill 6. So this idea that banning assault weapons and we Democrats can walk away and we're fine was also a complete fallacy. And the moment I said this, I of course ticked off the whole audience. But these are these issues that actually, if you spend time in it, look into it, understand these things, it's a lot easier to come to compromise and find an actual alternative that both sides won't be perfectly thrilled with, but are majority happy. And personally, I think for guns, for instance, I think you need to have some sort of, I'm a gun owner. I don't know if you know this. Michael and I go hunting. I was never allowed to have a gun in my parents' house, so we kept it in a truck while we were growing up, because you can do that in Colorado. And now that we have our homes, we're keeping your gun safe. But I believe that I will only ever have shotguns and rifles. I don't think I need a pistol. Some people do need pistols, but if you're going to have one, I think it should be registered, and I think you should pass a background check. And I think you should go through all the process of doing so, and I think it's okay to have a gun registry, which, boy, my Republican friends cannot stand me saying that. But my car is registered. My house is on the books. Why in the world wouldn't I register my guns? I have no problem with them. And if I want to be this law-abiding citizen that knows where it is and whatnot, I have no problem saying I have this weapon and that I'm responsible for what happens with the weapon. Or I will tell people it's stolen, or I'll tell the police it's stolen. I don't know why people can't accept that. Some people won't, but that's where I stand. So I think happy ground on a lot of these things. And think of issues when you go in as win-win. If we open the government tomorrow with saying simply open it and pay the federal employees, but I promise to come to the table, you'll get some border wall money and I'll get DACA, people would actually be okay with that. If you look, a year ago we shut down the government because we didn't have a solution for DACA, and now the right, or not the right, particularly Trump's people, want border wall funding. Do both. This is how our country is. I may not agree with one of those, you may not agree with the other one, but this is how we are, Other quick thoughts or questions? I don't want to keep you guys too long.
And just to cap it, I think that all comes back to your idea of choice voting. So, it just seems more natural to, as you said, moderate if you're able to 1, 2, 3. And it's conducive, it incentivizes, as you said, Republicans or Democrats to moderate on issues or pick side, pick, on separate issues, positions that might be traditionally thought of as on one side or the other, if they know that they're not going to be judged purely as yes or no, but as a 1, 2, or 3.
Yeah. So here's my final thought on all this. Running for Congress is a hell of a thing. I spent 15 years working the political process, and in 6 months, I learned more and saw a sadder and darker side of our society than I had actually imagined. And I've worked on campaigns, I've worked in the legislature, I've worked in DC, I've done a lot of foreign policy, and in 6 months I was shocked by a lot of things that came along. Both parties are heavily to blame, and they're actually far more similar than you think. The money is one of the biggest issues, and it's not so much the money that you're not allowed to have, it's the money that is legally laundered. You know, I won't take money from the oil and gas industry, or the gun lobby, or Captain Planet. I don't care what the issue is. I won't take money from so-and-so, but they're going to donate, you know, $50 million to the Democratic Party, the DNC, and the NT4C, and the NT4C is going to walk me through my campaign. You just took money from them, and you can't get around that. Ethically, you can't get around that, but we have. And the people in Congress, the people in charge right now, are burnout, they're tired, they don't want it either. And the funny thing is, they can't speak up. It shocks me that people in both parties seem to not have the capacity to speak up until their term out, literally and figuratively. Is one of your senators a Mark? It's a Virginia senator. I'm going to say a name this time then. I was out in Dallas speaking at Earth Day. Is that Earth Day? I was speaking somewhere in Dallas. And Mark Warner was in the back of the room when I gave this presentation on something. And he came up to me afterwards, your senator, and said, how do I become an independent? I said, oh, God, man, I've been running for 9 months, and you've been sitting in Congress for 20 years, Armed Services Committee, et cetera, et cetera. It's like we've trapped ourselves in this box. And anybody who goes to Congress, and a lot of the things I get is, why don't you go as a D, or why don't you go as an R, and then change things? Look at Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Well, for one, she is getting a heck of a lot of pushback from her own party. And second, that is extremely rare, that situation that she was in where she happened to be able to take on the incumbent, et cetera, et cetera. If you want to get to Congress in one of the parties, you have to play the game, you have to play ball for a very, very, very long time. And during that time, two things happen to the heavy majority of people. One, you lose your moral way. And two, you start getting sucked into a system where the money and the power becomes easier and easier. And boy, it is harder and harder to speak up or speak against or be honest with yourself. Because all we do is we worry about the next election, the next election, the next election, or what the people have to say about us. If we were to, for the first time in 2 decades, bring in an independent tomorrow, you would have somebody who, quite frankly, could be the Speaker of the House. If we were in a tight race, and right now the Democrats have a few too many, but before 2016, we thought, you know, this midterms was heavier than we thought, but we thought it might be neck and neck. And there's a guy named Zach Wong, who's a Republican down here in Tennessee, who was joking when he'd go around speaking that it's going to be 191. Is that the right number? What's 35? Anyway, it would be this number, and then Nick Thomas as the independent. Or there was a guy in Maine, Marty, who also had a good chance for a while as the independent. And if you have one independent, all of a sudden that's the person who decides who's the majority, who chooses who you get to caucus with, and you have far more power than going through a system of seniority. You have an ability to have a say, you have an ability to craft policy, and you have an ability to immediately be in front of television cameras because they like a story, they like something different, and actually speak for the American people. And whether or not an independent runs here and you agree with every one of their views, that person, as a not junior senator, but as a fresh congressman, is going to have far more impact than anybody might on either side. So, to all of us of our age, keep your eyes out for others who are rising through, because we saw a blue wave and we saw a female wave, and we knew we would. We thought there was going to be an independent wave as well. We went the other way, in fact, because of the Kavanaugh stuff. Red went redder, blue went bluer. The one independent governor was in Alaska, he lost. The one independent congressman in state houses, one in Maine, one in Alaska, one in Arizona, they all lost. Incumbents lost because people were so freaked. But as the pendulum always swings, it'll swing back. And I think in 2020 it's going to be very interesting. You won't see an independent president, but you'll see a viable candidate run. And I actually, what was it? This guy from Starbucks, I saw him on Saturday. What was it? Schultz. I saw him on Saturday and I was talking to him about this, and then found out there's an article about this. He could run as an independent. Bloomberg could always run as an independent. Kasich could switch and run as an independent. There's a few of them, and you'd actually have a viable conversation, even though they won't win this round. But if you at least have somebody who's viable running at that level, look for the down ballot races. Because with our generation climbing up and the voting ages finally starting to turn out to vote, we're going to see some change. And the most important thing to all of us is to realize that as a country, we are stronger together. Rather than being two divided sides, it is critical that we play to our better angels. So if there's people in this group who are hardcore Democrats or hardcore Republicans, if I've offended you in something I've said, I apologize. But the point isn't about offending a viewpoint, it's about talking about a policy. And you can disagree with a policy without disagreeing with the person. As long as we start to again remember things that Jefferson talked about, playing to our better angels, and trying to again find that thing that made us great, if you want to call it that, then we can come back around. But in the path we're on, due to our elders, your parents and my parents, we are playing a very dangerous game right now. And it's sadly not going to be solved by them. And hopefully it will be solved before we go too far. So, positive and negative. Thank you.